So we had a three-point agenda for today's testing group meeting. First aspect was to share with some of you who might not have heard about the testing resolution week improvements that we've made. I've been sharing with that. We also shared about the improvements in the SALT office hours, but then if you had any questions, concerns, wanted to deep dive into that. So we have folks from the core team who can answer that. And the second item was that we wanted to discuss about possibly collaborating at a much more deeper level. We were thinking that someone from the SALT core team will actually visit where the maximum number of the testing group employees are present. It could be Germany or someplace else. We'll get into that details later. This would help Saul, Souza, and then even any of the other folks to collaborate at a much more deeper level than what we've been doing. And the third aspect we wanted to run by was, in the meanwhile, what can the testing group, the tasks that can be done. Pedro will talk more about that. Any questions or any other items that you folks wanted to cover?
No, so basically, this is also what we wanted to cover because to me, it seems like the home of the project is still in this Trello board, and the cars that we have there, the goals, maybe they're at the moment not aligned with the current progress in those areas. And this is also the other aspect was that it's in Germany, it's the time for vacations, and because of that we didn't have so many resources, and we had to focus on the internal tasks more. So from our side there was not much progress here, expect some minor I did a small test run and then extracted a list of the slowest tests, but yeah, so we should definitely improve in how we collaborate here and maybe find a better way of doing it as the time allows, of course.
Okay. Sounds good. We went through the list of the goals that the testing group had in the Trello board, and that's something which it's very well aligned with what we are trying to accomplish within as well. So let me share that for the rest of the group to see. So these are the goals which Mihai is talking about. And Mihai, remind me, higher the number, does it mean that higher the priority or is lesser the priority?
And now the higher means it's like the top priority.
Okay.
And this was these results came from the votes of the participants in the group.
Okay, sounds good. And I particularly like the first item about making the release process more transparent. Even it comes up very often. It came up a few days back from the SALT community as well. They wanted to pitch in and help, and they wanted to understand what's the current testing process and what stage are we at. So I think that's like a really would be a big win. And I shared some of what we've been doing. This was the document that I shared with the testing group. Has everyone got a chance to look at that? And for folks to participate in the office hours or even watch the video later, were there any specific questions about what we've been doing?
Just a quick question. So I've been on vacation, so I'm terribly outdated at the moment. Is this linked in the Slack channel?
The document link?
Yeah.
This is something which I shared with mostly Mihai and I think Pablo, and they said they'll in turn share it with the testing working group. I think this has some additional, I can remove some of the additional sensitive details and maybe share it with the community as well. But it had a couple of sensitive items, so I haven't shared this yet very publicly.
Okay.
I have not posted this yet in the Trello, but I will do it today after the meeting, and then everybody could access that.
Maybe we could take an overview over this document, since not everyone is aware of this, sorry, and just go over it. And you, Kavya, if you could just give us an overview of what this document contains, so we are aligned before proceeding.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, that makes sense, and that also helps us to gather the questions that you have as and when we go through. You can pause me anytime, because this is not like quite a big list, but I mean, yeah, we can clarify as and when we go. So the major goal for the testing resolution efforts, what we've been doing at SALT, was we wanted to achieve 72-hour green test runs. And what this would ensure is that we don't have any flaky tests, or even when the test, our release branch test shows green, we are ensuring that this wasn't like one of the off scenarios wherein it's green. So 72-hour was a benchmark that we came up with, which would ensure that it's a lot more stable. And the team's effort is split between two of the release branches, 2019-1 and Neon. So here's a list of items that we are doing, and our efforts, it's focused on some of the things which community as well as SALT users as well as SALT developers would be more interested in. So one of the major bucket items is which we keep hearing about is improving SALT stability. So the first item, what we've done is with each of the PR that is submitted, we are mandating test cases to be written. And when test cases aren't accompanying the PR, then we require 3 reviewer and basically a process which is a lot more rigorous to make sure that we don't, that's one of the off scenarios, but that's not kind of like the mainstream ones. So basically we are pushing for the test cases with each of the PR, and so that we test each and every change that going. And the second item was from 2018.3, I think it was .4. So at some point of time, we switched from running the entire test suite with each of the PR to running just a subset of the test cases. And what we noticed was that this was causing a lot more problems down the stream. So we switched back to running the entire test suite. And it comes at a high additional cost, but that's something which we are working on to cut down. But at this point, we find more value that running entire test suite is more valuable to us. The third item was that we were hearing from some of the SALT users that some minion process would, some processes would take up like a lot of memory. And so in our testing boxes, we decreased the internal memory from 16 to 18 GB, and that's surfacing some of the memory leak issues that we weren't seeing before. So those are cropping up, and we are trying to solve them. And the next item is that we earlier we would do bulk merge forwards from one branch to another, and though this was easier in the process, what this would cause is that even though we merge forward from a green branch to another branch which was green, what made the first branch stable did not mean that would be the case on the destination branch as well. This caused the destination branch to go red. So what we are hoping to do is there's a couple of options now. Instead of doing like the bulk merge forwards from one branch to another branch, either the PR owner can port the changes, required changes themselves, and whenever they cannot port it, Solid Core team will help them port it. Spurti, can you close the door? And the other item is whenever the PR is raised, there was a few hours of like waiting time on each of the PRs. So this, we made introduced EC2 plugins. This helps us in auto scaling. It creates more VMs as required so that there is no waiting time on the PR builds. And we noticed that some of the test runs were taking 4 to 6 hours. So this is one of the items which Megan has been heavily working on and helping us with. She went through the exercise of going through the list of the PRs and then figuring out which was the PR which was maybe checked in, which beyond the point at which the test started taking up like a lot of time. We've identified that, so that's the good part, and then we are hoping to cut that down. The other aspect was basically we've been also testing like different sort of infrastructure. For instance, we moved to Mac Stadium because of which we cut down the test times. So that's another aspect that we're working on. And some improvements in logging. We hope to share the details of it in either one of the future office hours, or Felipe, who's our core team SRE, is also planning to write a blog post about that. So we'll get more details on that. And this is one of the major buckets was that any of the PR which was raised by a community member or basically like a Salt developer, it would create a lot of test failures which either weren't related to their PRs. And so we've been doing few items to make sure that that doesn't happen. So one thing was that a lot of times the test cases failure because of dependency aspects. I mean, either because of a network error, it couldn't reach out to the PyPy to download a certain package. And there were failures like, these were like transient failures and had nothing to do with the PR which was raised. So this was, so what we've done is we've added caching layers, which make sure that the package is always available for update, and the test cases don't fail because of that reason. And we've also moved to new Jenkins box, and what it means is that we have better hardware, and we're also making sure we stay on top of the updates. And we've also been using the pipelines on the new Jenkins box system, so which ensures that there is less manual effort, and a lot of it is automated. And with the golden images, and Pedro can talk more about that really, but just to give a high-level overview, we've also, earlier it was, and now some of it is, the changes is manual. We've pinned down the requirements, but we will take more of a manual look at when and how that needs to get updated. And this ensures that we aren't breaking unexpectedly any of the test cases with the PR runs. And we've also been collecting additional artifacts. Earlier, whenever a test case failed, we had less logging artifacts or items to look at. What we've also been doing is that even not just when a test passes, but then even when a test fails, we do attempt to send in all the related logging so that we have items to debug. Except for scenarios such as maybe SSH timeout, wherein we cannot. In all of the rest of the scenarios, we are hoping to get in additional artifacts. Any questions so far? And Pedro, did you wanted to cover about any of the testing resolution week improvements that we've done, which I might have missed?
I can go into detail of what we have been doing so far. So we have been identifying problematic test cases, flaky test cases that don't have a simple fix, slow test cases, and actually all of these identified test cases are being skipped right now. We are adding a custom skip message because we don't intend to keep skipping these tests. But the goal with skipping these tests is to reach that 70-hour all green. Why we are doing this is that once we get those 72 hours of green test runs, then we can start either improving slow tests or fixing flaky tests or migrating to a different way of testing. But we will be adding these tests one at a time so that we can identify the degradation of performance. If it breaks and we know for sure what broke the current test suite and all of that. The goal for the slow tests is mostly a rewrite, and probably this is where we could use help from the testing working group and the community. And of course, the core developers are also, or will also be working on that. We intend to switch from a mostly integration test suite to a more of a functional test suite, where instead of going through the whole pipe, so send a command in to the salt master, the salt master sends to the salt minion executes, then returns, etc., until we assert against what's returned. We want to take out the communication layer out of this. And what this means is if we are testing an execution module, we will call the module directly, and the SAD module will interact with actual services in case there's one that we need to interact. I'm saying this because we should not confuse this new type of functional testing with unit testing. With unit testing for services, it's okay for us to mock. The purpose of functional tests is not to mock. Ideally, we will not mock anything. We will test against a real system unless it's something that is really hard to get into a CI pipeline, at which stage we should consider how to better test that particular execution module. For states, we will call the state execution module directly, and the test suite will be prepared to run that call without the interaction of the transport, the communications layer. So that will speed up the test suite by a good magnitude. That's our assumption, and from some small tests that we've done, we are sure that that will give us a lot of increase in performance and slower test runs. So without going into much detail, that's what we've been up to on our testing efforts. We have identified some issues that we are addressing. We sometimes lose connection to the boxes, so we can no longer SSH to the box. The assumption that we are all agreeing right now is that we are having a memory leak. Well, for the TCP transport, we know we are having a leak, but there are several parts of Salt where we are almost sure that we are not cleaning up resources properly, like closing connections and all of that. And since our test suite runs a lot of tests, if we are not doing this kind of cleanup properly, we are consuming memory, not necessarily leaking. And so our efforts are going towards identifying this particular problem right now. And once we have that taken care of, I think we can start thinking on migrating and bringing in the tests that we've skipped. And yeah, more or less, that's what we have been up to. Mo, please correct me because I've been out for the past almost 3 weeks. But I've been on and off from the Slack channels, and that's, I think I've summed it up.
No, it's a very good summary, and I think it'll be great to open it up for discussion with the team here in a moment. Both what Kavya shared and Pedro shared, hopefully team brings to the forefront the amount of focus, attention, and work that the team has been putting on driving towards improving both our test infrastructure, the underlying environments and the automation, but also, of course, to support what we introduced through the whole community of ensuring that we move towards a test-driven culture around making sure that we're injecting quality code, we're maintaining the stability of that particular environment, which ultimately will help us with expediting our whole release process. This particular group, both in its leadership as well as its membership, has a tremendous amount of experience around how we can even do better. And I think at this particular junction in time, this is probably a good moment for us to start to think around how we come together as a working group to address this problem as a collection, not just as a subset of this whole team. So very much looking for folks on the call to start to think through their ideas. And I would like to put forward the proposal that we perhaps would do that through a workshop. There's a lot of notions around the next sort of heavy lift we would like to do. Reordering tests, instilling some more automation, looking at ways in which we can make the dashboards a little bit more transparent, and so on and so forth. So Pedro, Diwas, Megan, the rest of the group all have strong passion for how we can take this, and we want to marry that with the rest of the team here, and of course ask the leadership of the work group to start to take over and guide us through this process.
Okay, this sounds pretty good. Thank you, Kavya, for introduction, and Pedro as well, and Mo. One thing that I would like to propose, maybe, I think the workshop would make sense, and it would be good to actually start the work in this group. One other idea I was thinking, maybe after the workshop or sometime, we could create a pool of actionable tasks, because I think that's what we are missing right now in the group, and it was not really clear. If someone has now some time and he wants to contribute somehow, it's hard to find an actionable task and start with that. But I think it would make sense to create such a pool and maybe even have some kind of labels, because I know that some tasks are more critical and they need to be done now, but then the community doesn't have time now, and maybe we can signalize that other cards are not that critical, so you as part of community can pick that up, and even if you don't have time right now, you can deliver it in, I don't know, 1 week, 2 weeks, or 1 month. Then the community doesn't block the progress, but still has something to work on, something like that.
Okay. I think that's a great point, Mihai, and I can take that action item on myself. Pedro earlier was talking about converting the unit test to functional testing, and that's more of a long-term effort, but I think he also brought up a point about what are some of the critical items that we want to get done before the release. So I'd be happy to create a task and share it with the team. Currently, we are very close to 2019 to 1 release, but then the Neon, we would heavily be focusing on Neon for the next few weeks. So I can take that action item on myself and then create a list of, and then also differentiate the priority.
One of the things, Mihai, that you brought up that I would like to build on, which I think makes a great point, and again, the input of the community here would be appreciated. I think around the labels, there's definitely a criticality aspect for folks can pick up the ticket and work on it. But also there are buckets of work. So there'll be an underlying test automation bucket likely that we want to go after. There's probably test quality, both removing some of the flaky tests or improving the mechanisms in which we can test against the platform and so on. And then probably the third one is around the test coverage aspects. And how do we actually simplify the process of touching more of the components that we care about? And what do we want the other work groups to contribute relative to this effort? As we think about the Mac OS work group or Windows or so on and so forth, are there specific buckets of tests we want them to start to adhere? So those are sort of buckets of work that I think might be very useful. Test automation, of course, would be a very big one. Within it, it will have the framework. It may be talking about toolings and so on. So I would love maybe for us to offline, maybe through yourself, Mihai, and Kavya, to coordinate a date and a place for this particular workshop as soon as possible. And then get that sort of moving with a subset of the team, because I think that will then get us very fast into creating those buckets of work and helping stage them.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And then, yeah, we should organize that.
Thank you. Other team members on the call, any thoughts, comments?
Is there already a way to access the lists that Pedro was mentioning, the list of tests that need to be reworked, or should we postpone that after we've done the workshop?
Yeah, that's a great point. I will actually let Pedro and look at that list, and I don't see a reason why we should hold off until the workshop. I think we can actually share that list and start to think about it and use it either to start now or bring it as input into the workshop itself as examples of the type of things that we're facing.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
That's great, thank you.
So without an actual list right now, if you search through the tests for the uppercase words war room, you will you will see the tests that have been skipped during this effort. So without having a properly sorted and ordered list, this is a way for for you guys to know what we have identified and removed, so that we can get more stability and then start thinking on getting those back in. I think the team's consensus is first identify if that test has any meaning today. Does it actually test something, or is it just touching code paths so that we can get coverage? If that's the case, then that's a test that we should just delete. If it's a test that could be improved, then by all means, we should improve it. And going back to the functional way of testing things, on the Neon branch, we have switched to PyTest, which will give us a lot of leverage on different ways to testing salt. And I have an open pull request, which has some minimal work on how we can switch to functional testing. Again, all the efforts were on stabilization. That was something that I've done in a couple of hours, just so that we can get an idea of how we can switch to functional testing. But we should probably think on that approach and whatever tests we do think are slow and are integration tests, we switch them to functional. The reason why I also said slow and integration is because we have some not so well written unit tests which are by themselves slow. So those are also tests that we should address at a later time. But to your question, if you want to know what we've identified so far, that war room search through the tests will get you some ideas of what we've skipped.
Okay, so it's uppercase war room with a space in between, or just together?
Spaced. Yeah,
It's in the chat.
I can put that text in the chat.
It's already there.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I was thinking maybe I can help with identifying some problems by running the tests with Salt Toaster, because I run there with PyTest, and there are a lot of plugins for you can limit the time you allow per test, or you can create a top of the long running tests in descending order. I already did that for the unit test, but maybe there are other things like profiling or other useful plugins. Maybe we could also talk about that, and I could try some different things.
Yeah, that's another thing that we should make sure to note is that on our Neon branch, we've switched to running PyTest by default. The only, I was going to say the only caveat there is I think Windows is not yet running PyTest, but all the other OSs are. So that's just a heads up for you guys.
Okay, thanks. And I have one more particular interest in that problem that Pedro mentioned with memory leak or memory high usage. We currently have some issue with a customer reporting exactly this, and I think it would be useful for us. Is there somewhere we can look up about what you've found in this area so far, or maybe we can even contribute there with what we know from our customer or something like that? Maybe
So we have a few different tickets opened that detail what some people have been seeing. We, like Pedro said, we definitely know that there's something with the TCP transport. I don't know if that's what you guys are, or what your customer's using or not.
What we've noticed is that some of the Salt master workers are using a lot of memory.
Do you know which transport they're using?
Oh, you mean for the 0MQ?
Yeah, it's 0MQ in that case.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it'll be very useful to get the information, Mihai, on the issues that you're seeing and sharing that, because that'll be an additional data point that we can debug against relative to what we're also seeing in our environments.
Mm-hmm. How can I find those issues? Is there some, or do you have the links ready somewhere, or?
What I've done is just gone into GitHub and searched for memory.
Okay, yeah.
Open issues, and then that
yeah, I can
shows the current ones. You might also want to search closed issues, because we have a bot that goes through and closes stuff if it hasn't been active recently.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't made a lot of progress on identifying exactly what the leak is or where it's at. We do know that generally these sorts of things can crop up very easily in the networking stuff. So either 0MQ, the TCP transport, or IPC as well.
No, I don't know the details of our problem with the customer, but I think they are using a lot of minions connected directly to the master. And of course, then there are a lot of connections, and maybe this is the reason, but I don't know. I will talk to the person working directly on this, and I'll point him to the issues that you have in the Git repo.
Yeah, and if he wants to open an issue documenting what he's seeing, that would be great as well.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess the next steps are to organize this workshop and then see how we go from there, and maybe in parallel already create some tasks if possible, right?
Yep, that sounds like a plan. Regarding that, I'll get in touch with you, Mihai.
Yeah, great. And then I think it will help if I just move the board to the GitHub boards that you created, right? I have not done that yet. Okay, I will do that, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful because that's a public board which all of the rest of the working groups are using, so everyone will have visibility.
Mihai and team, these are exciting times ahead. We are very much looking forward to the collaboration and making, taking a good crack at this. As Diwa said, this is like an Edison problem. We still don't have the light bulb working, but we're like 300, 400 experiments down, and we know what to eliminate. And I'm sure with your help, we'll get to the light bulb working fast.
Yeah, I hope to.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other last items, or we good to close?
From my side, nothing else.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful day.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Nice day.
Bye.